As most of you probably already know, but for those that don't, Brother Dawson Knight is a member at Fairview at Woodburn, and we have his former pastor as our pastor. I really enjoyed talking with him yesterday on the phone, and he gave me a lot of ammunition to use against Brother Doug sometimes. But no, we want him to feel at liberty this morning, and this time I'll turn service over to him.
Good morning. I first want to thank the church for this opportunity and thank Brother Doug for reaching out, and thank the Lord for this day and what I've been able to feel this morning. Grateful for the song service, and just been blessed to be here, seeing familiar faces and hearing the different testimonies and words of encouragement, the Sunday school hour. All those things have been a blessing thus far. I do ask you all to pray for me this morning. I am extremely anxious. I'm always anxious, but super anxious this morning. And I ask you all just to pray with me, and just that the Lord would help me, and His message would be delivered in the way that He would be pleased, and not in a way that would be self-lifting or boasting in myself at all, but it would just be honor and glorifying to Him. That's our goal. That's our purpose. And I've considered the different services that I've sat in my lifetime, and all the services that I think to be the most precious. Sometimes there's not a lot that goes on. It's just where the Spirit of the Lord's there. It doesn't have to be a lot of preaching. It doesn't have to be a lot of testifying or singing. It could be just a 1-hour service, but just when the Lord comes by and touches your heart. And I know we all know that feeling, but those are the most prized services and experiences that I've had in church, and I'm confident that if we would just open our hearts this morning, I think He would bless us with that experience this morning. He wants to, if we would just allow Him to. And I do have a few preliminary comments. I told Brother Doug whenever he called me a couple weeks ago, actually, and he actually was the pastor, as Brother Brad said, when I was at Fairview, and I'm not going to say too much about him, but I can't say enough good about him and the influence that he's had on my life, my family, our church, ministry, all those things. And obviously change is different. Fairview, we just experienced that change, honestly, when y'all did too. And it's uncomfortable. It hurts a little bit. And I just want to encourage you all and tell you all y'all are in wonderful hands with Him being the shepherd of this church. Him and Sister Marcia, they were such a blessing. And I can never probably tell him how much he's blessed me. And I hope he doesn't see this. I was joking with Brother Brad. If he knew any of these things that I'm saying, he would probably make me get down from here. But I do love him greatly and appreciate all the things that he's done for my life. And I'd feel remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to just tell you all that. I also want to tell the youth here. I said this to Brother Brad. Obviously, I don't know how long Brother Doug will be here, but I do think he has a heart for the youth. And you're so benefited to have him as your pastor. And if I could encourage you, he came to Fairview at a time where my life was fragile. I was young. I was moldable. I was just saved. And I would just ask you all to really dig your cleats in and just give him the chance, listen to him, and learn from him. And I'm sure you'll see yourself grow spiritually by being under him. And so I do ask you for your prayers. I guess a little bit about myself. I don't feel inclined to go in great detail. I talked with Brother Brad about it yesterday, and I'm happy to talk with you all in deeper conversation after service if you are interested in hearing more. But I was saved. I always grew up in church, a missionary Baptist church, and I was saved in the 8th grade, and I actually told of being saved before I was actually saved. I was on the church roll at my home church at Fairview, and the Lord was gracious and allowed me to know that I wasn't really saved, and He drew me to an altar of repentance, and where He helped me to surrender to Him. I couldn't surrender myself. I found that. I thought in my when I tell my testimony, oftentimes I say I felt like I finally gave up everything. And I think sometimes in our churches and lost individuals struggle with this, but they hear a lot of experiences of salvation and testimonies, and I think sometimes they try to replicate that or reproduce that. And ultimately what the Lord wants is our heart. And finally, I got to a place where I just gave up. And immediately when I gave up and surrendered, it was just like that. It was just sweet peace. And as Brother Brad said, the songs that we sing this morning bless you a little extra when you know what they're talking about. And I've been blessed in that regards this morning. Called to the ministry. He asked me when I was called to preach. I'm honestly so bad with dates. And I was sitting over there thinking it was in 2021 when I was called to preach, but I didn't own up to it until 2022. And I've always been an overthinker and overanalyzer, and so I went a year without owning up to it. And there was a Sunday night at Fairview at our home church, and I just didn't even have any intention on telling anyone, and just stood up, and the Lord finally helped me to just say it publicly. And I said it, and of course Brother Doug said, well, you're preaching this Sunday. And so I preached the following Sunday morning for the first time, and here we are 4 years later. And lots changed, lots different, but all things have been good and blessings from the Lord, no doubt. And so, as I said, I ask you all to pray for me this morning, that the Lord would just help us to deliver this thought. Very elementary to me, it seems, and I'm sure it will be to you, but it's what the Lord has given us, and so we gotta run with it. I do want to take this opportunity to pick on Brother Doug a little bit. Y'all can tell him this when he comes back. I intentionally wore this coat. He was not fond of the sports coats too often, and I remember at Fairview one time, I came in with this coat, and he was like, D-Money. That was my nickname, and he was like, you gotta get rid of that one. And so I thought, since he's not here, I'm going to take this opportunity. I'm going to wear this coat, and I might even tilt my glasses like this while I read, like he does. All joking aside, I do love him, and I hope you all know that this morning. If you want to flip to where we're going to be reading, we're going to be reading from in the book of Jonah, and honestly going to try our best to cover really the whole book with the Lord's help. And I just got back from a trip as well, and this is only the second time I've preached after coming back from vacation, the Sunday right after. And I'm sure there's many other preachers here, and I learned the last time, and I'm learning a little bit this time. There's just something different. It's a little difficult. It's like I haven't preached in forever, and it's just been a week or so. And so I think that's part of my nerves and anxiety this morning, but I do know the Lord will help us. But on our way back is actually where I got my thought. I was frustrated all week. We had a few days where we rested and sat by the pool, and I was hoping, there would be some divine revelation. The Lord would just hit me upside the head and give me something, and that didn't happen. And so I just continued throughout the week, anxious, knowing of what was to come, that I needed to preach on something this weekend, and not knowing what it was. And on the way home, the Lord actually finally gave me something through something silly, and that was through traffic. And so the thought that's on my heart this morning is recalculating, and that'll be the title that we'll title our message this morning. And again, as I said, we came back from Disney, and the privilege that we all have in today's society is we can just get out our phones and say, "Hey Siri," and all of a sudden, a British lady or a British accent lady speaks to me, and I can tell her wherever I want to go, and she'll put that destination in, and she'll take me there. And without hesitance, I listen. I could not know where I'm going, and I have no lack of faith or confidence that she's going to take me exactly where I hope to go. It's pretty awesome, the technology that we have. She's able to tell us where construction is and road work, and where traffic is building, and all those things, and gives us different routes that we could take. And all those things are great, but we sat through traffic a few times. Atlanta was really bad, but then we were going through Chattanooga, and I guess there was a pretty serious accident. And I thought once we got through the Atlanta traffic, I was like, all right, we're home free now. I can send it. And sure enough, all of a sudden we got to Chattanooga, and it was like an hour of our time went away. And I was like, what has happened? And surely enough, it ended up being a wreck, but I just kept on ending the route, refreshing it, hoping that it would change our route. And eventually it did, and I'm thankful for that. But I got to thinking about how the Lord is spiritually speaking, there's some similarities there where we feel like we're on a route or a path that the Lord has directed our life, and all of a sudden He gives us a rerouting. He recalculates our route, not for our own good, but for, honestly, His good. And sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and sometimes it's painful and frustrating, and it's not what we really want to do. And it means that we have to be patient and wait, but it always ends up to be good. I also was thinking on the flip side, where a lot of times I only use the GPS whenever I'm unfamiliar with a direction, and a lot of times I don't use it when I know where I'm going. And I think spiritually speaking, there's a lesson within that as well. Oftentimes we only want to tune in to what the Lord His will is for our life and for us when we are in a crossroad, so to speak. When we have a decision to make, all of a sudden we want to pick up the phone and dial 911, hoping that it will be a direct line to Him, and we didn't spend any time with Him in the past. And I am guilty of struggling with this concept and this struggle with my flesh, where I'm constantly, and I feel like it's gotten older. We were talking yesterday about experience. I know I'm still young, but the older I've gotten and some experience that I've gained, I feel like the more sometimes I struggle with saying, Lord, I got this. And because He's helped me through one instance, I face an instance where it's still similar, and I'm like, okay, Lord, You helped me through this one. I think I got it this time. And ultimately what happens is I fall right back into the issues that I had prior. And so I know I said a lot of preliminary comments, but that's kind of where I want to pick up here in the book of Jonah. Of course, we all know who Jonah was. He was a prophet. He knew Scripture. And, of course, he was told by God, and we're going to read here in a second, to go to Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital of a country, Assyria, and Assyria was a brutal, cruel, nasty place. From my understanding, their military, it was a superpower in the region, and people feared them. And the Lord was frustrated with a lot of the things that were going on, and they were cruel. I mean, I read where they would skin people to death. They would just execute people in the most dark and cruel ways possible. And the Lord tells Jonah to go. And we pick up here in verse 1 if you want to follow along in the first chapter. It says, Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. And we'll stop reading for just a short time there in the third verse, but we see very quickly Jonah's heart is exactly what Dawson's heart is oftentimes. The Lord gives a call or an invitation into a direction that He wants us to go, and our flesh resists that. And sometimes we struggle with the fact of thinking that we know better. And I think Jonah struggled a little bit with that. And God's first words here were, Arise, go, cry against Nineveh. And I think a lot of times, even in VBS, we talk and teach and preach this, and almost seems as though God just gave Jonah this assignment or this job to do. But when you view the whole picture and you read the whole book, you see that honestly, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this book, yes, there was a great miracle and a great experience that took place in the city that we'll read in chapter 3, but I think the picture of this was not just for the people in Nineveh, but I think God was changing Jonah's heart. And a lot of times God will give us a direction in our life, and He will send us a certain way, and we'll oftentimes not know the why or what's or how's or what we need to do. And then all of a sudden, way on down the line, the Lord allows us to see what He was doing behind the scenes all along. Again, the Lord desires fellowship. I already made mention of that, and I think ultimately that is what this was here. It was a cry from God to Jonah. It was an invitation to say, hey, Jonah, I want you to do this, but I want you not just to do it, but I want you to do it with me. I think sometimes we view the things that the Lord gives us and He directs our lives to, it's just a task or a job assignment, and we shouldn't view it that way. and rather we should view it as a time, a place of where we can fellowship and grow closer with the Lord. Sometimes we go through times of, I would say, the mountaintops, joyful times and great times, and those times are obviously blessings. And I think those are still times that we should consider it being a blessing and a time of fellowship with the Lord. But also I think there's great privilege in the valleys. And while none of us want to approach a valley, and there might be some here that are in a valley currently, but none of us are hoping to experience a valley this week. But I have found in my spiritual walk that in the valleys is oftentimes where I find the most spiritual direction and the most communion with me and the Lord than when I'm on the mountaintop. I think that's exactly what God was kind of wanting Jonah to do here. He was wanting Jonah to spend time with him. And a lot of times God's problem isn't that He isn't willing to speak to us. The problem with us is that we're unwilling to listen. And I preached a few weeks ago, I can't remember where at, but I talked about spiritual ADHD. And I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm pretty sure I might have a touch of some ADHD. I get excited, I get hyperactive, and I can't sit still. And that's why driving home this weekend was so difficult. And I oftentimes just want to be doing something. And I think sometimes, spiritually speaking, we're the exact same way, where we're unwilling and we're not patient to just allow the Lord to move. Let Him do all the preparation. Let Him lay the foundation, and we'll just follow and walk with Him, and He'll help and grow us. And a lot of times He tells us to wait, and He tells us no, and we don't like that. We immediately want an answer. We want something right then and there. We live in a society that is very fast food based, where we just want to go up to a window and make an order and expect to get it right then and there. But that's oftentimes not how the Lord works. Again, it's important that we submit to the Lord. I was thinking about this. I'm guilty of this personally. How many of us, I'm sure if we, again, this is individual, but how many of us recognize, or the Lord's helped us to recognize, He has me, that a lot of my service to Him is just out of obligation and duty. And I think that's kind of the thought that's on my heart this morning. The aim that I'm trying to get us to understand is the Lord obviously wants us and gives us things, black and white things that He wants us to do. But I think He's way more pleased in us doing it out of with a heart and a desire to do it because we love Him. Not just out of obligation, not just out of duty, but because we want to please Him. And I think that's where true joy is found, in serving the Lord. So you think about in verse 3, Jonah here had a quick, we'll say, come to Jesus moment. And he obviously decided to be disobedient. I think he knew God's voice. And how many times in our life do we know what the Lord wants us to do and we're just flat out disobedient? And I've struggled with this sometimes. I think as we grow and mature in the Lord, and I found this to be true in experience, that I don't think, yes, there is great use in Scripture, and Brother Doug was beneficial in that point while he was at Fairview with helping me to find answers in the Scripture. But I also think sometimes He doesn't want us to just always go to Him in prayer. I think He just expects us to know some things through our time with being with Him, through fellowship. For example, if we think about, which I haven't raised a kid yet, but if you have a kid that's older and you have to constantly tell them to clean their room and they're in high school, and that might be the case for some, I think that would be frustrating. That would be really aggravating. And I think you would be way more pleased as a parent if you maybe had to do that when they were younger, but as they grew older, they just did it because they knew that's what they were supposed to do. I think the Lord, spiritually speaking, is the same way. That there's some things that He just expects us to do. He shouldn't have to knock us upside the head. He shouldn't have to give us a divine road to Damascus moment where He just appears in this mighty way. It should just be that still small voice that just guides and leads us and leads us to the right ways that He would like us to. And you think about, I was thinking about the GPS, and this is just how it all processed and came to me. But if the GPS told me to turn right, and I was like, I just turn left. And if I drove down, it said continue straight on, and then all of a sudden I was like, I'll make a U-turn. Like how ignorant that would be. And I sometimes do that spiritually speaking, where the Lord gives me a clear and direct path that He wants me to do and follow. And what do? I just decide a U-turn's better. I decide that turning right would be better than turning left. And again, I think that is a result of pride. And I think that's exactly what Jonah was struggling with here. And we'll see here later on that he was struggling with being proud. He was proud of himself. And we see also that I think this looks a lot like us. God told Jonah to go to Nineveh, and Jonah says, no, I'll go to Tarshish. God says, go east. Jonah went west. Right? And so we see that he did the exact opposite of what God had directed him to do. And I think sometimes, and this is super important point, that he was active. Jonah was doing. He was moving. He wasn't just sitting idle like a lot of people do. He was doing something, but was he doing what the Lord wanted him to do? And I think oftentimes that I think we dress up just doing and moving and doing things that look good and sound good and just put the sponsorship of God's name on it to say that's what the Lord wanted us to do. And we got to be very hesitant and careful in doing that and make sure that it's truly what the Lord wants us to do. Activity is not the same thing as obedience. Just because you're moving, just because maybe you're not standing in the same place doesn't mean you're being obedient. I think sometimes the Lord just wants us to honestly sit idle. That doesn't mean be complacent, but I think He just wants us to be content in the place or the season or the circumstance that we are in that period or season of life. And again, many Christians stay busy doing things while avoiding what God has ultimately called them to do. And I think about myself in that regards, where the Lord told me to preach, literally just like Jonah. He said, go. That was kind of there was no audible voice, obviously, but in my heart there was this deep burden. It was just the Lord said, go and preach. And what did I do? I resisted that. And I'm thankful that the Lord gives us free will. We talked about that in Sunday school this morning. But I do think His will is always accomplished. He doesn't need us. He wants to use us, but He doesn't have to. But I think that no matter what, whether we choose to be obedient or not, His will be accomplished, and it will be accomplished perfectly. Again, we find that Jonah struggled with pride. Pride often says, I know better. The scary thing about pride, and Brother Doug was big on this, and I'm sure he's already hit you all with this, but never say proud around him. He cringes. And even if you say, I'm proud of how Kentucky played, he would not be happy about that. And I think that is ultimately, we think about a lot of sins that we could just list off. I think a lot of the root of that, whatever sin it might be, is pride. A lot of us struggle with pride. I think all men, from the beginning, Adam himself struggled with pride. And we see that Jonah struggled with the exact same thing. He thought he knew better. And the scary part of it, it's subtle, it's sneaky. If we're not careful, it's like overnight we become proud without even knowing it. And that is intimidating to me, and that's why I think it's so important to allow the Lord to search our hearts. We don't do the searching. When I do the searching, I often leave some things tucked away and hidden. When I allow the Lord to search my heart, I find that He often reveals and shows me things that I never wanted Him to show me. But that is beneficial for us. How often do we say, I've prayed about it, or I've took it to the Lord, and knowingly that we've just already made a decision and we're kind of stuck and firm on it. And I know this is a little uncomfortable, but there's a lot of things. I don't want to talk about myself, but I have experiences that I just had that seem silly. And honestly, I'm a little proud to even say it and admit it, and I'll just use it. But I'm a middle school math teacher, and I was asked to help out and coach basketball. And I think, again, this is one of those things where the Lord has helped me to grow, obviously, but I think He almost didn't want to just have to hit me upside the head and force me to know I think He just expected me to know what to do. And I was faced with this decision, and I was praying. I was genuinely praying about it, asking the Lord to help me know what to do. And it seemed silly, but things like that, things that we often think are silly, are things that can truly take us off the path the Lord wants us to. It can pull us away from our house. It can pull us away from our family, our kids, our church. And before we know it, subtly and gradually, we've lost the thing that the Lord has wanted us to be the most invested in. And we see that in jobs, relationships, church, school, home, finances, all of these things the Lord wants to be in control over. He wants ownership over all these things. And I mentioned this, but how many times do we testify? I'm guilty of this. I'll be honest. Do we testify and say, the Lord's led me to do this, or the Lord's told me to do this, And honestly, you can say that in any missionary Baptist church, and immediately it's sponsorship to do whatever you want a lot of times. We have to be careful with that because there's so many times where I think we put the Lord's name on something and we just do it because that's what we want to do. That's wrong, and that's ultimately it's a root of pride of where that comes from. And we have to be extremely careful in doing that. And I think Jonah, again, he probably struggled with that a little bit. I think in Jonah, in the 9th verse of the first chapter there, they ask him who he is. And he replies, he talks about that he is in Hebrew, and he talks about how he's the Lord's, a child of God. And he's basically trying to convince them and make himself feel better about himself and about his disobedience. And obviously we read on, and I won't bother you and worry your patience in reading all of that, but he suggests to them that obviously he tells them that he was disobedient, and they throw him over sea. And then in the 17th verse it says, "Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights." And so suddenly we see a shift, right? A lot of times we think that the fish in which we see in this lesson is a bad thing. We teach in Bible school how this fish was a bad thing, or the storm that came about was a bad thing. And obviously it was a result or a effect of Jonah's disobedience and sin. And there are effects to the sin that we commit here. But I also think that a lot of times that storm was sent to Jonah because he was gracious. His love was so great for Jonah that he pursued him despite his obedience. And that's the gospel message, really. Despite our obedience, and even as a lost person, despite our rejection of the Lord, he continues to pursue us time after time after time again. And I've seen that as a lost person. I told of being saved before I was saved, and the Lord was gracious and still pursued me. Why? Because he loved me. And that's exactly what we see here, that this storm came and the fish swallowed up Jonah, and all these things look bad, but I honestly think that these things happened not as a result of punishment, but because the Lord was so invested in Jonah and he loved him that he had mercy and grace, that he sent this great fish he ultimately sent grace in the form of a fish. Sometimes God's rescue doesn't seem or look what we thought it was supposed to be. It doesn't look comfortable. It involves waiting and sitting in periods of silence, and even sometimes being hurt and broken. And I think it's important that we allow him to recalculate us. Again, that was the title of our message, and I think that's exactly, when Jonah got swallowed up by this fish, that's exactly what the Lord was doing to Jonah. He was resetting him, so to speak. He was helping him to recalculate his route and destination and hope that Jonah would repent and change. And we see that in chapter 2, and again, I'll try to just summarize it, but Jonah obviously there's a change in his heart. He becomes repentant, and he talks about how low he became, and he said, "The Lord, you were still gracious, you were still merciful, that you helped me through this." And then in verse 9, he talks about offering thanksgiving to the Lord. And I think that's ultimately when we are truly sorrowful and repentant, and we're willing to allow our hearts to be shifted and changed by the Lord. Oftentimes our heart is just a heart of thanksgiving and love and admiration to Jesus and who he is and what he has done for us. Again, some of the greatest times with the Lord, I already mentioned this, are the times in the valley. And I don't know this because I haven't talked to Jonah, but obviously this is a huge experience. And I think if we were to talk to him, though, his favorite part of this experience maybe even have been being in the belly of the fish, because in that location, or where he was there, is where he found the Lord to be the most gracious to him. I think there's great hope in that. I think there's great encouragement that we can glean from that, knowing that despite our disobedience, it doesn't give us just a get out of jail card to just do whatever we want, knowing the Lord's going to be gracious and merciful to those things. But I do think there's great hope and comfort knowing that the Lord loves us enough, despite our sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes we do things and we don't even mean to go against the will of the Lord. And I think he's still gracious and merciful to us despite those things. Then in Jonah 3, again, this gives me cold chills when I was reading it. And it seems very elementary, but it says, and the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time. And I read that, and I was just like, that's Jesus. Isn't that what he does to all of us, right? We sin, we make mistakes, we fall short. And what does he do? He comes back and loves us and hugs us. I call them hugs from Jesus, is what I like to reference them as. And I love being hugged by Jesus from time to time. I don't know about you all, but those are some of the most precious moments in my life. And I think that's exactly what happened here, right? Jonah experienced grace. He experienced love. He experienced God's long suffering. Lord's willing to give us third chances and 100 chances. Again, and we shouldn't count on those chances, but he does that because he loves us. He constantly is in pursuit of us. So we see that God restores and recalculates Jonah because he loves him. And then we fast forward to chapter 4. And this is where a lot of the thought, and I think really one of the most important chapters of the book is, and a lot of people just focus on the good part, right? And I'm actually going to read this, so bear with me. Chapter 4, verse 1, it says, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry. And so we see that Jonah was frustrated. Why? Because the Lord delivered the people of Nineveh. And so you say, well, what? Why would he be frustrated? Why would he be mad about that? And ultimately, he was so full of pride and hate towards the people in Nineveh and the Assyrians that he didn't want the Lord to be merciful to them. He didn't want them to be forgiven. And that's ultimately the root reason and cause of why he didn't want to go to Nineveh in the first place. Verse 2 says, and he prayed unto the Lord and said, I pray thee, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in my country? He's admitting that, isn't that why? This is why I didn't want to go in the first place. Therefore I fled before unto Tarshish, for I knew that thou art a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and great of kindness, and repentest thee of the evil. And so he's saying, this is why I ran. I knew you were going to forgive them. And now I'm mad and I'm frustrated and I'm throwing myself a pity party. And how often do we do the same thing where we see the Lord, maybe we're on a pathway where it's rocky and it hurts and it's not really what we want to do. And we see maybe other people that are being idle and maybe not really seeming to be working for the Lord. And the Lord's blessing the snot out of them. And we're just sitting here doing all the hard work. And we get kind of proud in that. And I think that's exactly what Jonah is struggling with here. Verse 3 says, therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech thee, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. I mean, think about that. He was so proud that he was willing, like he had so much anger and frustration and hatred that he was willing to die. Then said the Lord, doest thou well to be angry? I think there's something within that, right? How oftentimes does the Lord ask us a question? He poses a question to us, and I think about that. I don't think that's just in there for poops and giggles. I think that question, doest thou well to be angry, oftentimes when the Lord asks me a question, He's honestly not expecting an answer. He's just revealing my heart. And I think that's exactly what he was doing to Jonah here. He was saying, doest thou well to be angry? Do you not see what's in your heart? He's not wanting to answer. He's wanting Jonah to reflect and recalculate and reset his heart. So Jonah went out of the city and sat on the east side of the city, and there made him a booth or a shelter, and sat under in the shadow till he might see what would become of the city. So he was still hoping. He's sitting on the outside of the city, hoping that this city was going to be destroyed. Still proud, still hoping that all this would just come to pass and the Lord would destroy it, because that's what he thought they deserved. And then it says, and the Lord God prepared. Just like he prepared the great fish, the word prepared in all these instances that we're about to read means appointed. God appointed a gourd or a plant and made it come over Jonah that it might be a shadow over his head to deliver him from his grief. So Jonah was exceedingly glad of this gourd or of this plant. And so we see exactly what my heart consists of almost all the time. Right? Jonah was blessed. The Lord gave him protection. He provided. There was provision that the Lord gave him, and he became glad by the blessing. Right? And that reveals the heart of Jonah, that he was just self-seeking, self-serving, self-pleasing, and ultimately wasn't serving the Lord out of a desire and love towards him that the Lord wants us to have. Then verse 7 says, God prepared a worm when the morning rose the next day and it smote the gourd, that it withered. So again, this whole lesson here is Lord's appointing these things to happen because He's wanting Jonah to learn. And how many times do we go through times of challenge and suffering and heartache and circumstances that aren't fun and aren't pleasing? And ultimately I have to think, and oftentimes I have to think, that most of these things that we go through are just times and periods of learning. And a place where the Lord is just saying, it's not even, He's not wanting us to suffer, but He's wanting us to learn how to rely upon Him and trust Him and be in fellowship with Him. It's a time of growth and being spiritually mature. It says, and it came to pass when the sun did arise, and God prepared vehement east wind, and the sun beat upon the head of Jonah, that he fainted and wished in himself to die, and said, it is better for me to die than to live. So again, he's just willing to die. And the Lord's doing all these things. You say, why would the Lord cause Jonah to suffer? Why is He doing all? Why is He taking his shelter away? Why is He causing the sun to beat down on him? Why doesn't it seem loving? But ultimately, the Lord is going to get your attention one way or the other. And I think ultimately what He's wanting is Jonah just to say, wake up, Jonah. I am doing all this, not really, yes, I blessed the people of Nineveh and I saved them, but I want to recalculate you. I want to reset you. I want to put you on a pathway where you can be pleasing to me and honor me in the greatest way. And so then God said to Jonah, doest thou well to be angry for the plant? Again, there's a question. And Jonah says, I do well to be angry, even unto death. So then again, Jonah's saying, it is right for me to be angry. He's throwing the pity party, right? And I do that often, right? I struggle. I'm going through times of trouble. That traffic jam came up, and I became in Chattanooga, and I started feeling really sorry for myself. And I started to complain and just waller and just take out, honestly, my frustration on Sydney a little bit. And we do that oftentimes when we go through trouble and we just waller in that trouble rather than recognizing it. Sometimes it's an opportunity and a place where the Lord's saying, hey, come to me, and I want to help you grow, and I want to help you to fellowship and commune with me, that you might be able to be better equipped for what's to come. Then said the Lord, thou hast had pity on the gourd for thee which thou hast not labored, neither madest it grow, which came in night and perished in a night. And should not I spare Nineveh, that great city where there are more than 600,000 persons that cannot discern between their right hand and their left hand, and also have much cattle. So we see, ultimately, as that we conclude in chapter 4, the book here, that yes, the Lord blessed the people of Nineveh, but this whole book was about recalculating, resetting Jonah. God's attempt and ultimate and diligent pursuit to Jonah. Why? Because He loved him. And how often does He do that to you and I, where we make mistake, and we're probably going to make mistake tomorrow morning. And I know we are. We're all going to sin tomorrow morning, but He still pursues us actively. And I think it's important that we pursue the Lord, but it's so humbling to know that He's also pursuing us. And honestly, He's pursuing us a lot harder than we have ever pursued Him. Again, we are often very passionate about what makes us comfortable, right? Things, whether it be family, jobs, maybe a sport, whatever it might be. We get really passionate about things that provide comfort, a state of homeostasis, stuff that agrees with our preferences, things that make us happy and go with what we want. Traditions, schedule, routines. Again, all these things we get really passionate about. And when we look around, there's people, lost people, that have a huge issue, but we've spent way too much time wallowing and honestly creating extra suffering because we felt sorry for myself and didn't want the Lord to reset and recalculate us. Again, this is where I'll attempt to close this morning. Again, Jesus is more than just a GPS, right? GPS will speak to us, and it tells us the destination. But what I love about this is Jesus not only tells us the destination, but He is the destination. That is comforting. That's assuring to me, that knowing that the person who's speaking to me is not just telling me where to go, but He's going to be there when I get there. In fact, he's going to walk with me while I'm going there. And that is so comforting. In John 14:6, it says, I am the way, Jesus saying. Again, Jesus doesn't just improve our route. He is the route, the way, and the destination. So again, as I close this morning, God wasn't trying to get Jonah to go to Nineveh as much as he was trying to get Nineveh into Jonah's heart. And I think that's the lesson of Jonah. And my hope this morning as I attempt to close is that the Lord would help us to recalculate. And sometimes, again, recalculating is not fun. It's uncomfortable. It hurts. It's painful. And it's frustrating. And it requires a lot of patience. But I think it's necessary for us to grow in the Lord. And so I appreciate your attention. Again, my only hope would be that it would be a blessing to you and the Lord would use it for His honor and glory. Brother Brad. Thank you.
I enjoyed Brother Knight's message this morning. I was sitting there thinking as he was closing out about the Bible doesn't really reveal to us how Jonah felt after God asked him about why shouldn't I have saved Nineveh. But my thought was, and this has happened to me and it's probably happened to you, and when God calls upon us to do something and we do as Jonah and we turn away from that and we have to go through something like this, like Jonah went through, and then we still have to do that same task, wouldn't it have been easier if we'd just been right where the Lord wanted us to start with and done it from the get-go? Because God's purpose in Nineveh, as we studied this morning, God orchestrated all of that His purpose in saving Nineveh still was accomplished in spite of Jonah's disobedience. I saw that in that message this morning, that's how God is. God's purpose will be accomplished with or without us. He will bring it to pass. He will bring it to pass. I wonder this morning if there's a word or testimony or anything that you would have to say this morning before we close the service out. Anything? If not, it might be time to bring the service to a close. We really are thankful for Brother Dawson and his companion to come this morning and to be with us and to bring the message. Is there anything further at all? We will have service tonight at 6 o'clock. And I know Brother Rob's on his way back from Indiana. He was supposed to preach tonight, but I told him I would fill in for him since he was going to Indiana, or I was asked to, and so I might tell him that I'm glad he's back tonight so he can preach, but I'll go ahead and preach in his stead. I'll be glad to do that. So if there is nothing further, Brother Knight, we want to tell you again how much we appreciate you coming, appreciate having you. I hope you'll feel free to come back again. We'd welcome you back, and we'll all stand together and be dismissed in a word of prayer. Brother Doug, would you dismiss us, please?